They call us retrievers. We go into the dark places the public doesn't know exist, and we take care of problems before they can become real threats. Most people live their lives blissfully unaware that monsters exist. My job is to keep it that way. I wasn't recruited. I was taken. It started 5 years ago when I was a private contractor, doing jobs no one wanted to admit existed. One day, a black SUV pulled up outside my house, and 4 men in suits knocked on my door. They didn't introduce themselves, didn't offer a choice. They simply told me, "You work for us now." Since then, I've been on missions that would make most men go insane. I've seen things that don't make sense, fought creatures that shouldn't exist. The worst part? We don't kill them, we contain them. At least, that's what they tell me. The latest mission came in the usual way. A phone call at 3 a.m. A deep voice on the other end. No names, just coordinates. Class Omega. Immediate retrieval. You are authorized for lethal force. I had been in this line of work long enough to know that when they say Omega, it means we're dealing with something truly unnatural, something that kills indiscriminately. I loaded my gear, custom silver-lined bullets, UV grenades, a machete laced with something they call null alloy. The tech guys say it disrupts biological anomalies. I just know it works. The coordinates led me to Fraser, a small mountain town in the Rockies. It was the kind of place where people minded their business, where missing persons cases got buried under snowfall and silence. When I arrived, the town was too quiet. No movement, no voices. Even the neon sign of the only diner flickered weakly, as if struggling to stay alive. I checked my radio. Static. Not good. I found the first body near the town square. A man, middle-aged, dressed in a store uniform. His torso was hollowed out, like something had sucked the organs right out of him. His eyes were wide open, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. This wasn't a normal kill. This was something feeding. A wet sound came from the alley beside me. A slow, rhythmic chewing. I turned, raising my rifle. At first, I thought it was a person. A woman, kneeling over something, her shoulders hunched, her back rising and falling with each bite. But then she turned. Her face wasn't right. Her jaw unhinged, stretching down too far. Her teeth weren't human, too long, too sharp. Her eyes were black voids, reflecting nothing. And her hands, soaked in blood, twitched unnaturally. She didn't run, she just smiled. Then she lunged. I fired 3 shots to the chest. She didn't fall. Instead, she let out a guttural, clicking sound, like an insect, and kept coming. I barely had time to draw my machete before she was on me, her fingers digging into my arm, her breath hot against my face. I slashed across her stomach, and for the first time, she reacted. A shriek, not of pain, but of frustration. She stumbled back, gripping her midsection as black, tar-like blood oozed from the wound. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She laughed. Not a normal laugh. A mimicry, like she had heard a human laugh once and was now imitating it. Then she turned and bolted into the darkness. I didn't chase. Not yet. I needed answers first. I forced my way into the sheriff's office, scanning through paperwork, old case files. Fraser had a history, dozens of missing persons reports dating back decades. Most of them had something in common. They all disappeared in winter. And all were last seen near the abandoned mine just outside town. A sound behind me made me spin around. A young girl stood in the doorway. No older than 10. Pale, shaking. "They're in the mine," she whispered. "They took my dad." She pointed at the sheriff's desk. I followed her gaze to a set of keys. On the tag, one word, Silvercrest Mine. I took them. When I turned back, the girl was gone. The mine entrance yawned like a black mouth in the snow. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness as I stepped inside. The air was thick with decay, the scent of rot clinging to my throat. A sound echoed from deeper within. A clicking noise. I wasn't alone. I moved carefully, gun raised, senses alert. The tunnels twisted, lined with wooden support beams long since splintered with age. But there was something else, something unnatural carved into the rock, symbols, spirals and runes that pulsed when my light touched them. And then, ahead of me, I saw them. Dozens. Hanging from the ceiling like bats, their limbs twisted unnaturally, their jaws slack and drooling. I recognized some of them. Townspeople. The missing. They weren't dead. Not yet. I took a step forward, and a single droplet of black liquid fell from above, landing on my outstretched hand. The clicking stopped. Then, all at once, they turned their heads toward me. I opened fire. The cave erupted with movement, bodies dropping from the ceiling, scrambling toward me on all fours, mouths snapping. I threw a UV grenade. The explosion of white light sent them shrieking, their flesh blistering. Some fell, convulsing. But not all. I ran. Through the tunnels, dodging grasping hands, feeling breath on my neck. Then I reached it. The heart of the nest. A massive cavern, walls lined with pulsing, organic matter. And in the center of it, something large. Not a creature. A mother. She was fused to the rock, her torso stretched and embedded in the stone like she had grown there. Her skin was pale, translucent, her eyes massive and unblinking. Black veins pulsed beneath her flesh, pumping some kind of viscous fluid through the walls. She saw me. A voice inside my head. Not spoken, but felt. You do not belong. The walls moved. I fired at her, unloading round after round. She screamed, a sound that made my vision blur. The creatures around me convulsed, their bodies spasming. She was their link. If I killed her, I could end this. I reached for my last grenade, the null alloy charge. I yanked the pin and hurled it. The explosion rocked the cavern. The creatures shrieked, writhing as their flesh dissolved into black sludge. The walls collapsed. The mother let out one final, piercing wail before the darkness swallowed her whole. I ran, barely making it out before the mine caved in. By morning, the town was normal again. Or at least, it looked that way. The bodies were gone. The streets were clean. No sign of the horror that had unfolded. I tried the radio. It crackled back to life. Mission complete? I hesitated. I thought about the girl. The way she disappeared. And the way, when she smiled, her teeth had seemed just a little too sharp. Mission complete, I said. But I knew the truth. We never really kill the monsters. We just delay them. People like to joke about men in black, secret task forces, and conspiracy theories, but they don't joke about the things I see, because the ones who do, they don't last long. I work for a division so deep in the government that even the president might not know about us. My job is simple in description. I hunt monsters. The reality? It's anything but simple. When the call came in, I was already on my third whiskey. The phone rang in that slow, deliberate way it always does when they need me. Not a regular phone either, just an old school black rotary one with no caller ID. It shouldn't work, but it does. I answered. Confirmed sighting. Small town, northern Montana. 2 disappearances. Possible class 4 entity. Class 4. Bad news. I sighed, grabbed my gear, and headed out. The drive was long, the kind that eats at your nerves. The roads were empty, stretching through vast forests with nothing but darkness pressing against the windshield. I had my gun loaded on the seat beside me. I didn't know what I was walking into, but my gut told me this one was going to be different. Something worse than what I'd faced before. Montana was one of those towns that looked normal at first glance. Quaint houses. A single diner with flickering neon. A gas station that hadn't changed its prices in years. But something felt wrong the second I arrived. It was too quiet. Not just small town quiet, but dead quiet. No cars, no people walking their dogs, no kids on bikes. Just stillness, as if the town had been abandoned in an instant. I parked and grabbed my duffel bag from the trunk, filled with silver rounds, UV flares, iron spikes, and a custom-made shotgun. Standard gear. Would it be enough? Probably not. As I walked through the town, my boots echoed unnaturally loud on the cracked pavement. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that stretched like clawed fingers across the road. Then, I saw something move in the distance, just a flicker, something darting into an alleyway. Too fast for a person. I followed, heart pounding. A guttural sound echoed from the alley, a wet, slithering noise, like something shifting beneath a thin layer of flesh. My hand tightened around my gun. This wasn't human. I started at the last known location of one of the missing people. A young woman, Sarah McBride. Her house sat at the edge of the woods. The door was open, just slightly, like an invitation. I stepped inside, weapon raised. The air was heavy, thick with the stench of something long dead. Then I saw it. The walls were covered in something that looked like veins, pulsating ever so slightly. A low humming sound vibrated in my bones. I tightened my grip on my gun and moved deeper inside. A sound behind me, a whisper. I spun, nothing, then something shifted in the corner of my eye. A reflection in the mirror. Not mine. Something else was standing there, watching me. A shape began to emerge from the glass, limbs stretching unnaturally, its face distorting as it clawed its way free. My pulse hammered in my ears. I didn't have time to think. The reflection, tall, lanky, its mouth stretched too wide, eyes too deep, moved before I did. It lunged from the mirror. I fired. The silver round hit, but it didn't stop. It shrieked, a sound like metal scraping against bone, and then it was gone, vanishing back into the glass. Mirrors. It moved through mirrors. I turned just in time to see my own reflection smirk at me before it disappeared too. This just became a whole new kind of nightmare. I backed up toward the door, but then all the reflective surfaces in the room rippled at once. Hundreds of eyes blinked open in every window, every glass surface, watching me, studying me. You are not ready. The voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was inside my head. Then, a mirror behind me cracked, its surface distorting. A hand, elongated and wrong, began reaching out. I barely had time to move before it wrapped around my shoulder. I pulled out my sat phone and called HQ. We have a problem. Entity can travel through reflections. I wounded it, but it's still active. Silence. Then, Containment Protocol Delta 9. No reflections. Eliminate all reflective surfaces. Right. I smashed the nearest mirror with the butt of my shotgun. Then my phone screen. Then my watch. I stripped my gear of anything that could reflect. Then I heard it. A whisper from inside the glass of the kitchen window. You can't run forever. I fired. The glass shattered, but I knew it wasn't dead. Not yet. Then, my own shadow stretched unnaturally across the wall, curling toward me. It was learning. It wasn't just mirrors anymore. I needed to draw it out. Make it fight me on my terms. I set up in the town's old church, no mirrors, no windows, just wooden walls and candlelight. Then I waited. It didn't take long. The air went cold. My breath turned to mist. Then, the whispers started again. Hundreds of voices, all speaking over each other. And then it stepped out of my own shadow. I barely had time to react. I raised my gun, but it knocked it aside. Too fast. Too strong. It grinned that too-wide grin and whispered, "You've hunted so many of us. Now we hunt you." Then it lunged. The fight was brutal. Claws raked across my arms. Teeth snapped inches from my throat. My silver rounds slowed it down but didn't stop it. My UV flare seared its skin, but it kept coming. Then, I remembered something. Monsters don't just fear light. They fear fire. With my last ounce of strength, I grabbed the oil lamp from the altar and smashed it over the thing's head. Flames erupted, licking up its body, and it screamed. A sound so unnatural, so wrong, it made my teeth ache. And then, it was gone. Burned away. Or maybe just hiding. When I woke up, the town was back to normal. People on the streets. Kids laughing. The diner open for business. But I knew better. Because in the glass of my car's side mirror, I saw my own reflection smirk at me. And its eyes were not my own. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I was sitting in my apartment, drinking cheap whiskey and trying to forget the last mission when the phone rang. Not my normal phone, the other one, the one that only rings when something from the dark crawls out where it doesn't belong. I picked up, already knowing I wouldn't like what I heard. "There's been an incident," my handler said. "We need you in Black Hollow. Now, give me the details." Silence. Then, in a voice that sounded almost hesitant, he said, "The entity asked for you. By name." My stomach turned to ice. Black Hollow was a town that didn't show up on most maps. That wasn't an accident. I'd been there before, years ago, for a mission I barely survived. The thing I hunted then had been old, something buried for centuries. Something we weren't supposed to disturb. I parked my car at the edge of town and stepped out. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of wet earth and something rotting underneath. The streets were empty. Too empty, as if the entire town had been abandoned overnight. Except, I wasn't alone. I found the first body in the diner. A man sat in a booth, unmoving. His coffee cup was still full. His food untouched. His eyes were missing. Just two empty, black holes where they should have been. Then I noticed something worse. The coffee? It was still hot. That meant whatever had done this had been here recently. And it was still nearby. I checked the kitchen, empty. The back storage room, nothing but flickering fluorescent lights and the faint smell of copper. But as I turned back, I saw it. The body had moved. The man's head was now facing me. His lips had curled into a grotesque smile. I pulled my gun. He spoke in a voice that wasn't his. "It's waiting for you." Then his mouth kept stretching, skin splitting at the corners, lips peeling back until his jaw snapped and he collapsed in a heap of dead flesh. I made my way to the sheriff's station. It was as abandoned as the rest of the town. The radio on the desk crackled to life the moment I stepped inside. Static. Then, a voice. My voice. "Agent Carter." I froze. My hand went to my gun. "You left something unfinished," the voice continued, "and I've been waiting for you." The temperature in the room dropped. My breath fogged in the air. I turned slowly toward the holding cells in the back. Something was waiting for me there. Something that knew my name. The lights flickered violently, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to stretch, walls bending inward, doorways growing impossibly narrow. A pressure built behind my eyes, a feeling like I was being watched from inside my own skull. The last cell was locked. I knew better than to open it, but I stepped closer anyway, my gun aimed at the darkness inside. Then, movement. A figure stepped forward, just enough for the dim light to catch its face. It looked like me. Same eyes. Same scars. Same everything. Except for the smile. The thing grinned at me, too wide, its teeth stretching far past human limits. "I've been practicing," it said. "Do I look convincing?" Then it lunged. I barely got a shot off before it was on me. It moved too fast, too smooth, like a shadow pretending to be solid. My bullet tore through its chest, but it didn't slow down. I hit the ground hard, my head cracking against the concrete. The world spun, and in that moment of weakness, it leaned down and whispered my name in my own voice. I shoved my knife into its gut. It laughed. Then, it changed. The skin melted, shifting, reforming. The eyes became hollow black pits. The mouth stretched, opening wider, wider, until it was nothing but teeth and hunger. It had been toying with me. Now it was done playing. The walls around me pulsed, the entire station shuddering as if the building itself was breathing. My ears filled with a deep, throbbing sound, like something massive stirring beneath the town. I didn't have time to think, I just acted. I reached for the emergency flare in my belt and cracked it open, shoving it straight into the thing's gaping mouth. It screamed. Not like a person. Not like an animal. Like something that had never known pain before. The light burned it, its form flickering like static, struggling to hold shape. Then it was gone. Just vanished. Like it had never been there. But I knew better. I wasn't dealing with a creature that could be killed. I was dealing with something that had let me win. Morning came. The town returned to normal, like nothing had ever happened. People walked the streets. The diner was open. The sheriff's station was full of officers doing paperwork. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Had any of it been real? Then I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. And for just a second, it smiled at me. A second voice, my voice, whispered from the back seat, "You left the door open." I spun, gun raised. The seat was empty, but the laughter, that stayed.